Today we're going to talk about perm theory, which includes the history of perming and the phases of perming. All right, so when clients request a perm texture service, sometimes they want to add volume or texture or support. They want to add textural interest in selected areas, like someone with short hair, they just want it on the top, or to have the option of wearing their hair straight or textured. So they can style the hair so that they emphasize the curls, or they can straighten it back out again. All right, history of perming. Okay, so people wanted curly hair back to ancient cultures. So in the Egyptian days, they would take mud that had minerals in it. They would wrap their hair around wooden rods, and then they would apply this mud to their hair. And the minerals that were in this mud would temporarily curl their hair for a period of time. It wouldn't completely come out as soon as they shampooed their hair again. And that was the first earliest perm. But in 1905, Charles Nessler made the first real breakthrough. He did this for longer hair. It was wrapped tightly around heated rollers, and it was a spiral wrapping method. Remember, the original spiral wrapping method started from the scalp and went to the ends. Okay, so why did he make this for, well, back in the early part of the 1900s, everybody had long hair. No one would have ever dreamed of getting their hair cut off if they were a girl. Okay, so that was just not done. So hair was very long. You can see in this picture, the hair is piled up around the head. And getting a perm meant that it was easier to style and easier to keep it into the style, that it wouldn't collapse right away, especially if you had fine, thin, straight hair. So here's a picture of someone getting a perm with one of these machines. And the thing up at the top that you see here, this is called a chandelier, like a chandelier that you have in your house with lights in it. And the whole idea behind this was these rods were heated up very, very hot. So 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So to keep them from burning the head, they couldn't lay down against the head. So there were counterweights in here that would hold these up until the perm was over. So you can imagine you're putting chemicals on the head and then you're adding electricity. It could be pretty dicey. My grandma had one of these perms when she was a teenager, and she ended up with a huge blister on the back of her neck because the person that was giving her the perm didn't stay in the room all the time, and grandma started burning, but she was too timid to say anything. So she had a great big scab there. So there were some dangers involved with this. Okay, so as I said, they did heat this up to 212 degrees. And obviously everything was made for long hair. That's all that there was. Now in 1926, the crokinole method was created. This is the method that you have practiced when you were wrapping your 9-section perm. It was to accommodate shorter hair after World War I, which I'll talk about here in a second. It's also known as the overlap method because the hair keeps overlapping each other. It led the way to the use of clamps that were preheated on a separate electrical unit and then placed over the hair. And then it was called the preheat or machineless method. And also, you still had strong alkaline chemicals that were used for this. Now, it's interesting that they used these clamps because, as we're going to see here, in the 70s, those clamps came back, just like that picture I just showed you has come back in a different form today as a digital perm. So why did they have to invent something different? Well, look at everybody's hair in this picture. Literally almost overnight, every woman in America went from having very long hair to having a bob. Okay, this happened. These girls are flappers in the 1920s, and it just resonated across America. people got rid of their hair. They were the new modern woman. They look very, very different from that first woman that I showed you in the early 1900s. And so they had to come up with a different form of perming if this girl right here has curly hair and she has curly hair, if you wanted to wear your hair curly. As I said, this method came back in the 1970s, and I myself had a few perms using this machine. This was called the Uniperm. It was the only one that had this. You preheated these clamps, and then you would wrap the hair, and when you wrapped the hair, it was, you wrapped it with more hair around a rod than you normally would, because you had to have room to get those clamps in there. So you would have gaps in between your rods, okay? Check out how these ladies look. The hairdresser, how she's dressed, was more similar to being a nurse back then. Here is another picture from looking at the front of that same girl's hair, the same hairdresser's working on her, and you can see how much hair is on each perm rod. These rods right here giving me the heebie-jeebies because the rubber band is cutting into the hair there, but the clamp would have pulled that up. You never want that rubber band cutting in like that. You want to put picks in, or the combination of that and the perm solution will break the hair off. I believe in another video I talked a little bit about the trend in the 70s of having this big mop of hair that just like floated around your head. You can see that the root area is straight and all the curl was around the edge. Now how you achieved that is you would get your hair wrapped like this. So you used long picks to stack the perm rods out. So it would be curly here, and then it would get longer and longer and longer as if the perm had already started to grow out. So all we wanted was the curl around the edge. We did not want the scalp area up here, the crown or the back or anything curled. And you would end up a lot of times with hairstyles like this. Okay. And I know this looks completely goofy, but trust me, every time period in history has their goofiness. So it could be that, or it could be, again, the one that I showed you before with the curls around the edges. All right, today's acid perms have a pH of 6.9 to 7.2. So they're right around the neutral portion, or sometimes they'll refer to perms as low alkaline, which they're still alkaline, but they're much closer to the acidic range. And they have exothermic perms, okay? So exo, like outside, or endothermic is outside with the dryer. Exothermic generates their own heat. So you mix two bottles together, and when you shake them, they get very warm. Okay, they're self-timing, self-heating. These were awesome perms. We still have them. A lot of times these will say something like, if you have tinted hair, it's 20 minutes. If you have virgin hair, it's 20 minutes. Or if you have highlighted up to a certain percentage, it's 20 minutes. It's a very safe perm to use when you have multiple things on the head, multiple porosities due to color, highlights, things like that. Okay, so you can see they're neutral perm products, low pH alkaline perm products, and low no theo. Okay, I have never used any of those. I've used alkaline, which is cold waves, acid, which need heat, and exothermic, which are self-timing. Okay, then we get into the digital perm. Okay, so everything in cosmetology goes back. No matter how goofy you think something looks, we figure out a way to go back to it. So if you remember that first picture of the lady hooked up to the wires on the chandelier with the hot rods, we've now come back to that. It uses heated rods and a temperature regulating machine to digitally control heat and set curl. Think of it as you want your hair to look very similar to this girl, or to Meghan, the Duchess of whatever, Cornwall, married to Prince William. You're going to get that look. It's a very soft wave. And from what I have seen on the internet, it is looser when it's wet and it gets a little bit curlier when it's dry, but it's still very, very loose. So if you have a traditional perm customer that wants lots of curls, they are not going to like this. All right, here we have a modern day customer getting a digital perm. You can see the wires again hooked to the head. They have these like foam pads that keep the rods off the head. And again, you end up with very nice soft curl, not a lot at all, just a little bit to give you body. And again, we've gone back to where we started. Okay, the phases of perming. Perms generally involve two phases: physical, which is your wrapping, and then chemical, applying the chemical solution that is going to make a perm. Hopefully that is not your final result. Please don't do a perm like that. But you're going to see over and over again on tests, it's going to say which one of these phases is more important. They're both equally important. It doesn't do you any good to squirt chemicals on if it hasn't already been wrapped, and it doesn't do you any good to wrap it if you don't squirt the chemicals on. You need both phases. They are equally important. Okay, the curl that you get is determined by the size of the rod that you use, and here's a nice pick underneath those rods holding the bands off of the hair. That's a different kind of rod than what we have. If you notice, this rod is fat the whole way through. It doesn't dip down in the middle. It doesn't get skinnier. This is called a straight rod. The kind we use are called concave rods, and we're going to see that later on. But just so you know that there's two different kinds of rods you can use. All right, the chemical phase, two chemicals. Again, you have your perm and you have your neutralizer. Okay, the perm is a reducing agent. Your neutralizer is an oxidizing agent. Okay, so when you break the bond, okay, the bonds come apart. And then when you rinse the hair and then you put the neutralizer on, it's an oxidizing agent because it adds two H's, two hydrogens to the end of the broken bonds. And then when you rinse that, you add the water to that, you get H2O, and the bonds come back together, and the water goes down the drain. So you're oxidizing the hair. Okay. Okay. Perm solution is known as waving lotion or reforming lotion. Older ladies in Hooversville will say, "I want a wave." They mean a perm. People my age will say, "I want a perm." If you say a perm, that's a very confusing term, because are you doing a permanent wave or are you doing a permanent relaxer? Both of those can be considered a perm. So you have to be very clear about what the client wants. Okay, again, the perm or the wave breaks the disulfide bonds. It allows the protein to assume the shape of the rod. Okay, the neutralizer is applied after the perm solution is thoroughly rinsed. If you do not rinse this long enough, you are going to still have perm solution in there. And when the neutralizer comes in and closes down that cuticle, the perm solution will be trapped in there, and it will smell like perm forever till that hair grows out. All right, check what you know. What three things are added to the hair when perming? In 1905, who invented the first heat permanent wave machine? Believe it or not, you are going to have to know these people's names. So you're going to have to write down their names and the year and what they invented so that you know this. The two major phases are physical and the phase of perming that involves wrapping the hair around the desired tool is the. True or false? The chemical phase is more important than the physical phase. And true or false? The chemical phase involves applying the perm solution, rinsing it from the hair, applying the neutralizer, and rinsing it. Okay, what three things are added? Volume, or texture or style support, or all three. In 1905, Charles Nessler invented the first heat permanent wave machine. That's the one with the chandelier and the heavy rods. The two major phases of perming are a physical change and a chemical phase. Should say physical phase and the chemical phase. The phase of perming that involves wrapping the hair is the physical phase. The chemical phase is more important? False. They are equally as important. And the chemical phase involves applying the perm solution, rinsing it, applying the neutralizer, and rinsing it. True. All right, thank you very much for listening today.